the majority of this class is grinding the mirror. When you first get your mirror blank, it's rough. And so the first few steps are something we call rough grinding. And what you're basically doing is you're making your mirror the right curvature at that point, the right focal length. When you first get your mirror blank, it's going to be somewhere around 54 inches for the focal length. It might be a little shorter, it might be a little longer. And like I said, it's going to be rough. The rough grinding starts with using something called 220 grit. That means that there are 220 little pieces per square inch. Looking at the board right here, this is the process you will be taking while grinding. The first two are the rough grinding. As we get lower, as the numbers get smaller, these actually become micrometers. So these grits are actually much finer. And so instead of rough grinding, you're actually smoothing out your mirror. Eventually you will polish your mirror. And once your mirror is polished, it's going to look shiny. It's going to look nice and shiny, which is what you think of when you think of nice glass. It's going to kind of look this side of the surface. Once you have it polished, you will be making sure that the curvature of the mirror is in fact the parabola that you need. And that's the last step. So a little bit about the rough grinding first. As I mentioned, the rough grinding are these first two grits. It's the 220 grit and the 320 grit. I will be showing you in just a minute how you're going to be doing this, but I want to mention that by the time you're at 320 grit, you want to lock in your focal length. You might be wondering, how do I measure the focal length? There are a couple ways to measure the focal length. One way is using a spherometer. So this is the spherometer that we have that you will be using. To use this spherometer, you first want to calibrate it, and we have a flat surface, and when you put it on the flat surface, this number is going to read 0. So when you take this and you put it on your mirror, just like this, it's going to show you a number. And you might wonder, well, what does that number stand for? Well, luckily, you don't have to calculate anything. We have a nice chart right here that tells you what the number means in terms of the RC, the radius of curvature. Again, your goal for this class is to get a focal length around 54 inches. Focal length and RC, it's just a difference of a factor of 2. So a 54-inch focal length is 108-inch RC. And so you want to get your RC to be around 108. If it's not exactly 108, that's okay. But that's what you will be doing the first few grinding parts, is making sure that your focal length is exactly what you want it to be. So let's say you're done with the 220 grit and the 320 grit, and then you're going to start smoothing out the surface more. We're going to start with this 40 micron, and then it's going to go all the way down to 5. In this step right here, to make sure that you've actually done everything you need to for your mirror per step, you're going to use a magnifier, one that might look something like this. You can turn it on, and you're going to put this against your mirror, and you're actually going to magnify the surface of your mirror, and you're going to look for anything that sparkles. Sparkles, like it looks like a diamond. When you find something that sparkles and it looks like a diamond, that's what we call pits. It's a actual pit in the surface of the mirror. At the time you're on the 40 and the 30 and the 25 and so forth, you don't really want that many pits. You might have a few pits, and that's okay. You just don't want more than about like 10. Let's say you think you're done with the 25, and then you look at your mirror and you have like 50 pits. Well, you're not done. You're gonna have to keep going with the 25 to get rid of any pits. And so that's kind of the goal of the grinding, is to start with a rough mirror or a rough piece of glass, and you're going to smooth it out as much as you can. A few last things about the process. The first few grids that you guys will be using, you have to work outside. Why? You don't want to contaminate the inside with this grit. Once you're down to this stage of smoothing and polishing, if you have some big grit that accidentally comes and hits your mirror, you're going to end up having to go back so many steps to polish that stuff out. So when it comes to the 220 grit, all the way until the 25, you're actually going to be working outside to do so. So the tables that you guys are going to use to do the grinding, they are stored inside the room. So when we're ready to start the grinding process, we do have to take the tables outside. You'll need a bucket of water. You'll need a few other things. So let's go outside and I'll show you exactly what you need.